Hello, everyone. Welcome to the VC podcast. This is Shawrya, your host. And today I have with me Shobhankita Reddy. I know Shobhankita for a few months now, and she's working with Speciale Invest and has been in VCs, has been working with the VC for the last 1.5 odd years. And Shobhankita also happens to be one of the mentors at the VC Fellowship. So glad to have you, glad to host you today, Shobhankita. How are you doing?
Shaurya, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm a little nervous going into this conversation, but also it's been great fun interacting with the Metwe and IBC folks. So excited for this conversation.
Thank you so much. Is this your first podcast though?
Second,
Second. Oh, which was the first one though?
so I recorded a public policy podcast on
Okay.
data, the implications of that for the Takshashila institution. That was the first. This is the second.
So how was your experience back then?
Same, I think walked in nervous and walked out smiling. It's always a great conversation. So that's what I think I'm after.
So you've always liked expressing yourself and talking it out, or have you been more of a reserved person who's kind of eventually become more extroverted because you realize that your job demands it?
I think I've always enjoyed nerdy conversations. I've always, my friends in school would call me Shobhankita Nerdy because I was this really geeky, academically oriented, very success metric oriented student, very much a teacher's pet and all of that. So I grew up very academically oriented, and I always enjoyed conversations that were geeky, nerdy, that made me feel like, wow, I'm learning something and there's just so much more to explore to life. So I think I was always this big-eyed, curious kind of a person growing up, and I think that hasn't changed even now. So I wouldn't call myself shy, but I do think I prefer conversations that are meaty versus small talk and fluff.
Right.
Yeah, but I have been very expressive in my own personal relationships, friends, etc. So I think it's this little mix.
It's a nice balance, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you were in high school, what did you want to be? Was it were you even aware that VC is a
No.
career option back then?
No, not at all. I think I first heard of venture capital 2.5 years ago. This was, about 2-3 years into my job at Wipro, right? So I was going after software engineering, then moved to product consulting, sales, whatever else. I just didn't think the realm of financial services was possible for somebody like me. I come from very, a tech background, and you always hear about hedge funds and private equity, and these are just words and jargons you don't really understand.
Yeah.
I was a part of business club in college, but even then it just didn't seem possible that I could myself,
Right.
be able to do something like this. And when it just seemed possible and how attainable that was, I think I took that leap of faith, left everything, joined that internship, and then kind of made that work for me. So no, not at all. Today folks in college are so aware of all the career options available to them. I regret that I was not very, I was not very open-minded. I was very much focused on a software engineering, product consulting role.
Right.
I did that, and kind of worked from there. And so my journey in VC has been its own exploration, and yeah, it's been its own journey.
I think that also has a lot to do with the fact that we're kind of conditioned to believe that if you're pursuing commerce, then we are likely to become chartered accountants or do something in finance. And if you're kind of engineers, then we are likely to only focus on tech-related, career options.
Correct.
We eventually end up realizing that that's not the case, and it ends up getting flipped out. Like I've got so many of my friends who were pursuing BCom honors back then. They're now in pure product roles, right? I know somebody who's ended up becoming like a software engineer after pursuing BCom honors, which is so crazy when you think about it.
Yeah.
But back then, we were meant to believe, and that's why we probably ended up taking a lot of pressure that, are you sure this is something you want to do for 40 years? And now in today's generation, even after choosing a profession, we don't know whether we'll be doing this for 40 years or not.
Absolutely. When I was 17, I couldn't have been more lost. I took engineering because my dad was an engineer. I took computer science because that was the top branch. I got into the topmost college I could get admission into. And, there was no more thinking after that. And, once you join college, getting a job seems like 4 years away. And you're not the day-to-day, trying to explore, trying to learn, your own day-to-day. And your whole thinking about the careers just seems like a far off decision making that you put off until, oh shit, it's here. And now I have to apply for an internship, and now placements are happening and folks around me are getting placed. And what do I want? I never really bothered to ask myself that. So I think very confused for a long time. And it just feels like when I realized that this is something I absolutely like, and I, did my volunteering stints, etc., into venture capital, trying to explore if this really is for me, because I didn't want to make a mistake of jumping into something and then figuring it out that that was not really what I wanted. I think that's when things really opened up for me, and I felt, a little free in my own way, because this was a decision I was really taking for myself, and not so much through that conditioning of, growing up an engineer, growing up in a very academic oriented family. My parents wanted me to do an MBA. I wasn't sure if that was for me. So, doing it was, in some sense like a rebellion in its own right, because, I wasn't sure if that MBA would, solve all my life problems. But, if I explored on my own, I would still learn a lot more about myself. And I think that's what's happened the last 18 months.
Right. So I think when you were in college, I mean, even if you look at the Wipro role that you had, it's fairly different from what a lot of people end up expecting from a Wipro role, right? How did that happen, and what's the story behind it? I think I know the story in terms of how you transitioned from Wipro to a VC, but I think it's a very, very interesting story. And I've heard a lot of stories now, because I've been spending a lot of time talking to VCs, but your story is probably one of the best stories that I've heard, because the transition is so, I mean, it speaks about the courage that you had. It's very hard to take a leap, the kind of leap that you took. So I think it'll be great if you could cover that, the story, right, in terms of how you got into Wipro and the realizations that you had, which made you realize that, okay, VCs is your calling, and then the gamble that you took with your life, which eventually ended up paying dividends.
Yes.
So,
no, I think coming from a college such as NIT Warangal really helped, because, Wipro hires different kinds of colleges for different kinds of roles. And I was put on one of these fast track roles, which is equivalent to an MBA degree, the kind of exposure that Wipro gave me inside of the organization, they would have otherwise only given to folks with an MBA degree. So I was with only an engineering degree, because, I kind of came from one of their tier of top universities. And I joined the Innovation Center, which is the office of the CTO. And I think even in my 3 years there, I was never doing just one thing, right? I was exploring multiple things. So I started out, as everyone does, as a software developer, called a project engineering role. And then because of the environment I was in, which was the Innovation Center, the office of the CTO, we were doing a lot of prototyping. We were building a lot of, product prototypes, trying to show that to customers, learn their experiences, show it to domain experts, trying to see if there's any, validity in building that out as a full-fledged product. Wipro has multiple platforms and products. And the idea was, can we add an extra feature to that? Can we expand that service offering to customers? So we were doing a lot of these trial and error, and that experiment culture was very much there in the Innovation Center. So it didn't feel like I was just doing one thing. It felt like I could talk to customers, which is, typically your sales, also replying to RFPs, RFQs, also pitching to customers and learning from their experiences. So I think I feel like in those 3 years in Wipro, whatever I felt like I could do in the realm of things, I finished doing. I explored all the things that was possible to me. And then startups also happened in the sense that Wipro has an open innovation program, which the CTO was leading. And the open innovation program is really, getting good ideas that arise outside of the organization into the organization. And this could be startups, academia, research institutions, your customers, your clients, and trying to really understand what else you can do, what all is going on in the industry, trying to track those kinds of latest tech trends and market reports, right? And I think through that is when I began to talk to other organizations outside of Wipro. One of that was startups. So I began engaging with a few startups, enough to realize that, this is so exciting, because forget exciting, it's also such a tough job to be a founder. And I think just those conversations with a couple of founders at the time made me realize that, a full-time job in just this, and not the sales, not the RFP, RFQ, not the rest of it, but just this seems to be so fulfilling as a job in itself. And that's when I think I first heard of venture capital, because Wipro has its own corporate ventures program. Some of these startup founders I was talking to also were funded by, a couple institutional investors, some angel investors. And so they would talk about their interactions with some of these VCs. And I think that's when it really hit me that if I'm here, then I could be on the other side as a VC for the same startup. It just sounds, in the realm of possibility. And I think that's when I began looking out. I first started out volunteering for startup communities. Huge shout out to Head Start Network Foundation. They run one of the largest, startup communities in India, and they have not focused so much on VC funding for startups, though there is a particular vertical like that. But they're trying to just make entrepreneurship a little more respectable, trying to make the journeys of founders a little more enjoyable, a little less hard. And I think volunteering for Head Start in my weekends, weekdays, evenings, just meant that I got to interact with a lot of angel investors.
Right.
I got to interact with a lot of VCs. And I made a lot of friends across the founder community as well. And just that exposure made me feel like this is something I can do as a full-time job. I seem to enjoy this a lot. And that was like my little feet in the water, my proof of the pudding to then take that plunge into that internship. And at that time, I was trying to talk to multiple VCs, trying to get conversations to anybody who would give me time. And, you would just be surprised how generous people can be if you reach out and ask nicely and ask for their time. And, also tell them as to your own journey and, expect that they help you a little bit. And that worked out for me. A lot of people gave me their time. A lot of people sat me down, listened to my story, my background, understood my strengths, my weaknesses, and then told me, these are particularly the firms that you could apply to. These are the things, these are the job roles that you might be a fit in. And just giving me things that I cannot know from the outside, right? Like, what is their day-to-day like? What is their expectation on the role, the pay? What are the things that they thought from the outside would be super enriching, but was not actually once you become a full-time VC. Those kind of things kind of became a little more clearer. And so I think when I took that leap of faith and took that internship, I pretty much knew what I was getting into. But it's only when you get into that you know that you actually didn't know anything. It's like a learning on the go every day, really.
So what did you tell your boss or senior at Wipro when you got an internship, right? And you were doing a full-time role and you had been there for like more than 2 years, 3 years approximately.
3 years. Yeah.
3 years, and then like taking a leave. So how did that conversation go?
Yeah. No, I actually didn't tell many people at the time. I think I was ashamed. I think I was so unsure if this will work out or it will not work out. It was just a leap of faith. It was a trial. It could work out. It could not. I could move back into a startup product role. I could come back into another, tech firm, with a role very similar to what I used to have at Wipro. So at that time, I couldn't take a lot of people into confidence except my very close, net of friends. And so I didn't speak about this to a lot of people at the time. I just did it and hoped that I would figure it out on the way. And just the fact that I can look back at it and say, wow, I must have been nuts. It's something that I'm able to do now. At that time, I was full of shame, full of uncertainty, full of ambiguity. Couldn't have spoken about it as openly as I'm doing right now because it's so unconventional, right? Even when I speak to people and explain to them that 3-month role in between was actually only an internship. It was not a full-time role. People are like, wait, so this was before Wipro or after Wipro? I'm like, no, this is after Wipro. This is after 3 years and 3 months at Wipro that I took a 3-month internship. And so it's not the most conventional, intuitive of decisions. And so I have to explain even today, but I'm able to at least talk about it a lot more freely right now.
So how did you approach this internship? Like you were reaching out to folks who were already working with VCs and then somebody shared that, okay, it's a role which would actually add value to you. And then you decided to take a leap of faith. Is that how it happened?
Yes. So I spoke to the folks at Inflexor. So my internship was with a firm called Inflexor, and it's a tech-first fund. And so they're investing only in tech startups.
Right.
And, they appreciated the fact that I bring not just academic background, but also work experience in tech. And so they valued that. And this was something they asked me even during the time of the interview very openly that, look, we don't have a full-time role after this. And I know you would appreciate a full-time role, but we just don't have that. So is it okay that you do a 3-month role with us? And we will, recommend you and help you, get placed in another full-time role. And would that be something you're okay with? And I was willing to take that leap of faith because I just liked my conversations with the folks. I just felt like there are different kinds of VC firms, right? Some are tech first in their approach. Some first in their approach. Some are more financial investors, and so they expect folks with a CA, CFA, accounting kind of background. And so I think it was very clear to me that in that slotting of venture capital funds, Inflexor was very much a fit because they were looking for somebody with a tech background. And they appreciate that, through their screening, through founder evaluation, through conversations with founders, trying to understand markets, etc. And so I felt like in that breakdown of VCs, this is a fit. I enjoyed conversations with the folks there. They were very open about the experience that I will have as an intern. Correct? Because a lot of VC internships are remote. And I do believe that, especially if you're giving 3 months of a time, leaving a full-time job to do something, it's best if you can pack in as many learnings as possible in that little time. And so I was keen on doing a full-time role, as in the office kind of a role. And so, they were open about the kind of experience I will have, and they really lived up to it. Even today, the folks at Inflexor are really, really good friends. Their analysts at the time were the same age as me, and so it was really like a vibe match. And at the same time, they didn't really hold me back from anything at all that their analysts would have gotten exposure to. Of course, I only did that for 3 months, while their analysts would have done it for more than a year. But what was promised to me entering into that internship kind of played through, and I had that confidence in them and myself. And it was also like a thought through decision to some twisted small extent, because I always felt like, look, I've done this for 3 years at Wipro. I can always fall back on this. Right. I can do this because I know that I have skills that I've developed that I can always fall back on. And this seems to be something that I'm really, really interested in. And I will never be able to take this risk much later on. So right. So a little bit of recklessness, a little bit of thinking through that, being able to say, I have savings, 3 years, thanks to the pandemic, I didn't spend too much as well. So I had some savings. So the idea was I can afford to take this so-called risk. And, I don't think a lot of people think of it this way, but in a 40, 50-year-long career, 3 months is a very, very short period of time. It doesn't matter whether that 3-month role was an internship and if it paid you, equivalent to the role that came previously. If you're doing this and your heart's in the right place, you're willing to take that leap of faith on yourself. And so with this whole thinking and impulse and a little bit of recklessness, I think I took that decision.
So what did your day-to-day look like? I mean, you talked a lot about what was promised to you and how it was exactly what was promised, right? So what was promised, and how did your day look like at Inflexor?
Yeah. So I think Inflexor was that foot in the door that I was really looking for. Inflexor was that. It was my preview into the world of venture capital. It was my preview into the world of what kind of firms exist, what kind of people work for these firms, what kind of DNA is required in small teams. Because, I'd until then only worked for really big corporates, be it my internships, be it at Wipro. I'd only worked in really large teams, large setups. And so just the culture and DNA of a small team is very, very different. And so all of that was great exposure. They also have like a intern onboarding material, right? So they gave me a lot of articles, a lot of videos online that I could watch. And I would just show up at work, watch some of these in my free time, but also help them with sourcing. So I would go to events along with their analysts and associates. I would, just look through pitch decks after pitch decks and shortlist companies that we would want to talk to. Really understand what is the differentiation here, what is the founder claiming versus what is the VC lens to the same thing. And just learning all of this from scratch, even though you come with an understanding of business and tech and sales, it's not the same in a startup environment, especially if it's early stage startup. So I think that 3 months was really that, takeoff period before I could do a full-time role that really allowed me to make mistakes, to ask any question, and they would give me the time, because they were also, I think, fascinated by this 25-year-old intern they had, and I think they really invested in just my learning as well. And so founder calls, events, due diligence. So at that time, there were a couple companies that went seriously into a yes or no decision at the later stages of the investment process. And so I got to see what does founder F checks look like, what was market understanding, competition analysis, what is all this, and just breaking all of that down, because I've never done anything like that prior, right? So just understanding all of that, as well as portfolio updates. So every VC firm has its own set of portfolio, and just being able to do monthly check-ins with them. There are people who do, weekly check-ins with the founders and are always their points of contact for the VC firm with that particular portfolio founder. But they coming back and kind of reporting as to what's going on in the fund, what's going on with that company, how can the fund add value. I think all of that, just hearing all of that, even though I was not actively involved with these founder conversations, 3 months is a short time. But I think that was great learning as well, because you know what it takes to build that business. You're aware of the nitty-gritties of not just one startup, but a portfolio of startups at the time. And in those 3 months, it also so happened that Inflexor was hosting their first ever LP annual event, which is limited partners. So every fund has limited partners who have invested in the fund. And so they were calling upon some of these limited partners and doing like an annual event. And I helped organize that, the logistics of that event, just getting to meet some of these founders and LPs in that event. And it also so happened that the LP event was on my 25th birthday. So it made it a little extra special. And, Inflexor, being true to their words, made it the grandest 25th birthday I could ever ask for. This was we were walking through Taj until 6 a.m. in the morning, and all kinds of crazy stories that night. But just a very, very holistic experience in every angle, right? Because it was a new industry. I was learning. They were investing in me. They were teaching so much. They gave me exposure to everything that happens in a VC firm, including founders, evaluation, due diligence, portfolio updates, just the day-to-day of that, as well as just good friends for a lifetime. So that 3 months has really been, I think, the experience that was promised and what it hoped to be. And it was the folks at Inflexor that referred me to the folks at Speciale. And so the shift to Speciale also happened. That's thanks to the folks at Inflexor. Inflexor and Speciale work at the same WeWork.
Yeah.
The offices are in the same WeWork in Bangalore. And so, come the 4th month, I was just climbing upstairs and going to my new office and starting up.
Between your role. Oh, wow.
No, not at all. Not at all. Because I think they were very understanding of the fact that I came in here for a 3-month period. I'm looking for a full-time role after this. They helped that transition happen. And, 10 days after that, I think I took a 10-day break in between, which is understandable because I wanted to do that myself. I spent some time with my family at the time, trying to help them understand what I'd just done. And then kind of move on with the role at Speciale.
So, how did your parents react to this? Because I can imagine most of the so-called Indian parents, completely freak out if their, daughter or son is kind of working at a great place, when Wipro is one of the so-called traditional household names, right? And, dropping out of that after 3 years, doing an internship, that too in a space which I think most of the Indian parents or middle-aged folks in India don't understand, right? So, what was their reaction to this?
Yeah, at the time, I think it was a huge shock to them because I had not brought them into confidence when I decided to take upon that internship, right? I just did it without telling them. I told them after Speciale happened to me in that 10-day break, after Inflexor and before Speciale, I actually explained to them only then that, this is something that I've done and I'm taking this role at Speciale. Tada, I'll have to move to Chennai for this. So I'm be moving cities for this new role at Speciale. So I think they took their time, but I think they were also understanding to the extent that they tried to understand what venture capital is about. My dad, has read more articles about venture capital than probably even I have. Maybe I read very, technicalities of fund management, of investments, how to, I think I read a very different kind of VC articles than my father does. My father is trying to understand things like pay, long-term career. Does having an MBA help in becoming a VC? Does it make you a better investor if you have a MBA background? Because he's still trying to convince me to have an MBA, right?
I was actually thinking about that. That is it to kind of build a strong argument to push you to an MBA?
I think so. But I think he was also trying to understand for himself.
Right.
Now that I've taken this decision for myself, they wanted to be there for me and understand what is this whole space about. Because, my father is a typical engineer, which is why I became an engineer in the first place. And they don't really understand, financial services, let alone startups, venture capital. And both of them work in Dubai. So, far removed from the tech ecosystem in India. So, they're not really privy to all of this. But I think they try to learn, they try to, just get themselves acquainted with the basics of venture capital to the extent that they can. And they've been trying to support me and persuade me to do that MBA, to perhaps get a job in Dubai and stay closer to them, all of that, but still in the realms of what I really want to do for myself. So that's been, a like an evolution for our own relationship, to be honest.
Right. So how did the culture at Speciale, initially appear to you, and how was it different from what you were anyway experiencing at Inflexor?
No, I think every organization is so different, right? And for me, coming from like a big MNC setup,
Yeah.
and my team itself was like 25 people across Silicon Valley and India,
Right.
and different hierarchies, different roles. Those who did product only did product. Those who did sales only did sales. And for me to then move to Inflexor, which was a very sector agnostic series firm, tech first but still sector agnostic, to Speciale, which is a very specialist fund and does very specific things only. So I think that has been very, very different. And
Right.
Speciale is also very operates in a very lean and frugal way, pretty much like the deep tech startups. I think Speciale funds
Right.
operates in its own very lean, frugal way. The DNA is one of ownership, accountability, as well as punching above your weight. Really to do things that are larger than just what your typical role would be, and the kind of exposure that Speciale offers is also proportionate to that. And also, it's very entrepreneurial in its culture, because if you think about it, both the partners at Speciale decided to own fund, inculcate the culture of building an institution for the long haul, a VC fund that stands the test of time and multiple funds and multiple decades. That really is the idea behind Speciale. And so I think everything around Speciale is organized like that, to go very deep into the few sectors that we go into, to be very specialist in nature, to operate more than we can, to bite more than we possibly can chew. So that really is the culture at Speciale. And so it's very, very different from the Wipro culture I came from, right? And so that has been, initially a shock. Initially, it's difficult, I think, to find your own footing, because you're also trying to learn the sector in itself. Because I come from deep tech background per se. I understood tech, I understood software, but going as deep as Speciale does and being able to break down sectors in a way that VC needs to do is still a learning and process. And I just moved to Chennai to make this job happen. So I was in Bangalore at the time, and then moved to Chennai for Speciale. So there were multiple things I think thrown at me that I had to kind of learn on the job and kind of evolve from there, and very, very different. And I would personally say that I've just grown so much as a person, because remember I told you growing up, I was this success oriented, metrics oriented, very much an academic minded geek. And today, to understand that VC is all about financial returns to LPs, it's also about winning that deal and getting that deal done. But it's also about people and culture and relationships, and just being a part of a community and an ecosystem that is so tight-knit that, you have to be emotionally intelligent in a way that I perhaps didn't know as a school kid and a college kid. So all of that has been a personal evolution for me as well. Just a lot of adventure and resilience and grit and all of that. Really, it has been, Shawrya, so much has happened in my own professional life the last 18 months that it's just it's just so much. Yeah.
So, I mean, you've shown a lot of admiration for so-called entrepreneurial culture, right? So, I think that makes me question, why not be an operator yourself and build something? Because, you're very curious, which I feel is a trait that almost all successful entrepreneurs have mentioned as a very key trait for successful entrepreneurs to have. And I think you're somebody who likes to read about business. You come from a tier 1 institution, right? So I think a lot of so-called green checks, right, with respect to you being able to do something of your own. Then why not start something of your own? I mean, maybe not now, but when you're actually looking to take that leap.
Yes.
Is that something that kind of came in your head that, hey, I can also be an entrepreneur?
No, not at all, actually. I think at the time I was looking to break into a new industry and learn as much as I can about that industry. And I think taking that internship and kind of making all of that happen for me and evolve from there was entrepreneurial in its own way, but starting up on your own, trying to build your own business is very different. And it didn't even cross my mind at that point in time that that's what I want to do. Perhaps sometime later in life, who knows? I mean, never say never. At this point in time, not so much. I think I'm just trying to learn. I'm trying to build that, skills, work experience, network, all of that. I'm just in that input phase and not so much trying to go out and build on my own as yet.
So as a VC, do you find work-life balance, or is it very, very far-fetched for you at the moment?
Being a VC, I think, is like a lifestyle in itself.
Right.
I say that is because after some point, you don't know if these are professional friends or personal friends. Correct. Because you just meet so many people so regularly, and conversations slide into your personal life, your parents, all of that. So you don't really know if these are professional, personal. All of those barriers kind of. And so I call it a lifestyle in itself. Because on a Saturday something's required of me. Maybe it's a personal favor that I'm doing to a founder, but is that work, or because it's a personal favor, is that my personal, which part of work-life balance is that? So I think the lines are blurred. And I will only say that when you're young in your career, being able to do that extra mile, going out of your comfort zone to do that, taking out the time, only pays out in the long haul. And all of these small things only compound. And so maybe 5 years later, I wouldn't do the kind of things I would do on a weekend as I do today. But as of now, I think it's all the time I have, and I'm willing to invest that into relationships and network, as well as just doing right by the people that I want to do right by, and just being able to show up for people who expect you to, even if the expectation is only in certain ways. There's nothing wrong in that, because at the end of the day, it just comes back to yourself and your career. So I think it's fine. Yeah. I don't think I've really answered the question of work-life balance. I think I've answered to a no. And I think it is that. It's difficult. Think about it, right? Most VC firms are really small teams. And which is why, Speciale, we are a sub 10 team, Inflexor, 12, 15 member team. So this is including investments and beyond, right? Like this is the entire fund is all of 10 people, 15 people. And so everyone's taking on more than they possibly can. And that's the culture. Some organizations are more intense than others. But I think, work-life balance is difficult.
I think even the largest of the VCs teams are in India are, I think, not more than 40 odd folks, as far as I've heard. I could be wrong. And that's fairly small. Look at the kind of startups that they fund and the kind of folks that these startups end up employing. The number of people who are being impacted by this, it's huge.
Yeah. And so work-life balance is going to be difficult. But I think if you like the work that you do, you can push yourself to do it until you one day decide you don't want to, and that's completely fair. But I think the expectation on the role itself is that you're able to push yourself, because, think about it, right? It might sound crude, but there's that many more people vying for the same job. And so you have gotten that opportunity and that privilege, then, do that to the utmost sincerity, push yourself. All the learnings are worth it.